Now to presidential politics. A slew of new polls out today show Americans with deep and growing concerns about the president's economic leadership. In advance of President Obama's address to Congress later this week, Republican presidential contender Mitt Romney said today he can do better. Judy Woodruff has our story.
Whether it's his overall job approval rating or his stewardship of the economy, President Obama today faced the worst polling numbers of his presidency. The NBC News Wall Street Journal poll found 44% of respondents approved of the president's job performance, while 51% disapproved. An ABC News Washington Post survey showed 62% of those questioned disapprove of the president's handling of the economy, while just 36% approved. In both surveys, just a fifth of Americans said they believe the country is headed in the right direction, a record low during Mr. Obama's time in office. At the White House this afternoon, Press Secretary Jay Carney said Mr. Obama was focused on jobs, not polls.
He fully understands the anxiety that is out there among the American people about the economy, the frustration at the pace of growth, the frustration at the pace of job creation, and that's why he feels it is so urgent to take action now and not to simply say, oh, well, we shouldn't do anything and then let it all be decided next year after an election.
The poll numbers followed Friday's report that net job growth ground to a halt in August. They also raised the stakes higher still for the president's job speech to Congress on Thursday night. Today, the two top Republicans in the House, Speaker John Boehner and Majority Leader Eric Cantor, sent a letter to the president. They said neither side should approach economic policy as an all-or-nothing situation.
Competition's always a good thing.
In the meantime, one of the Republicans campaigning for the president's job, Mitt Romney, put forward his own plan in Las Vegas. Romney's camp released a booklet with 59 ideas aimed at jump-starting the economy. They include lowering the corporate tax rate to 25%, down from the current 35%, and cutting federal discretionary spending, except for defense and homeland security, by 5% immediately to reduce the annual budget by $20 billion. Romney would also make federal agencies offset the cost of any new regulations on business by dialing back existing rules. The former Massachusetts governor insisted his plan would get the economy moving again.
In the first 4 years, this will grow the economy at approximately 4% per year for each of those 4 years. It will add 11.5 million new jobs for Americans. This is a business plan for the American economy. We have to recognize that our nation is in competition with other nations around the world. And if we want to create jobs, we have to have the best business plan in the world.
The Obama re-election campaign released a statement shortly after Romney's remarks. It read, "While Mitt Romney spoke today about the struggles of the middle class, he offered a plan that would tip the scales against hard-working Americans." Romney and his fellow Republican hopefuls get another opportunity to sell their ideas tomorrow night when they debate in California. And we're joined now from Las Vegas by Ari Shapiro of NPR. Ari, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
So we just highlighted a few of the points in the Romney plan. What do you think's significant about what he's put out there now?
You know, the broad outlines of the plan hit some of the key themes of the Republican Party for the last several years: cutting taxes, limiting regulations, shrinking government, new domestic oil and gas drilling. Those broad outlines are things we've heard before. Some of the specific ways he proposes accomplishing those are new. For example, he wants to give Congress the authority to give a thumbs up or thumbs down to any regulation that's proposed by an executive agency. Similarly, he wants any new regulation to be matched by a rollback of a regulation of equal size. Another thing he said today that we hadn't heard from the other Republican candidates is that he wants to impose sanctions on China. He called China a cheat, a currency manipulator. He said they're stealing American intellectual property. And so, you know, while the broad outlines of this job creation plan look pretty familiar, some of the specific details are things that we haven't seen before.
And I was curious about the China aspect of what he proposed. Ari, is this something that, what have economists and other political analysts been saying about that? Is that something that people think could have the effect that Romney says it would?
Well, Romney says he doesn't want to start a trade war, but he also just doesn't want to surrender right off the bat. China is the largest holder of American debt, and so when it comes to the U.S. economy, China has significant clout, significant power. That's worrisome to Americans, and I think there's some disagreement about what the best approach to China to take would be, but the approach that Mitt Romney laid out today seems to be a bit more aggressive than the other Republicans are suggesting.
His proposals, Ari, down the line, different from President Obama's?
You know, what was interesting to me is that while there is a lot of difference, there were a few areas where I don't think President Obama or Mitt Romney would emphasize this, but there was some commonality. I mean, for example, Romney said today that Congress needs to right away pass a free trade deal with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. Those have been sitting on the shelf. Well, President Obama has been calling on Congress to pass those free trade deals. Romney said repeatedly that he believes being the lead innovator is going to be the key to America's economic future. He said manufacturing has to be the core of America's economic rebound. Well, those are both things that President Obama has talked about as well. The key difference is that President Obama believes that government investments and government spending can be sort of the jump start that gets the private sector going. Mitt Romney, in contrast, says you have to shrink government, get government out of the way, and then give the private sector the room to grow.
You know, listening to the conversation, I don't know if you were able to hear it, that my colleague Jeffrey Brown just had on the international economy. We're reminded again there are questions about how the structure of the economy is changing. Is that something that the people around Mitt Romney acknowledge and talk about, or are they just focused on the mistakes of the Obama administration?
Well, I think they're doing both. Mitt Romney used a metaphor today that was very effective with the audience, where he said, President Obama is taking a payphone approach to a smartphone economy. He joked that President Obama keeps putting the quarters in the payphone, wondering why it's not working. And he said, Mr. President, the payphone is disconnected. And so it resonated really strongly with the audience that was laughing and applauding. But I think it was a way through metaphor to emphasize that he thinks the economy has outpaced the Obama administration and that new approaches are necessary. Now, that said, many of the approaches that Mitt Romney suggested are approaches that the Republican Party has been suggesting for some time.
All right, we know you've covered the White House, you've covered President Obama. Any sense right now of how they're dealing with the just sort of relentless bad news on the economy and how that's affecting their approach to this campaign?
President Obama has been trying for the last 2 years to create new jobs. And his problem now is that on Thursday, he has to deliver a speech that needs to persuade the American people that suddenly there are more new ideas to create more jobs, and also that these ideas could conceivably get through Congress. Well, that's at least what he has to do if the goal is to actually create new jobs. Now, if the goal is to distinguish himself from the Republican Party and argue that the Democratic Party and the Obama re-election campaign has the answer while the Republicans do not, well, then these proposals don't have to get through Congress. They just have to win over the American people. One way or the other, though, after 2 years of the Obama administration and these really difficult economic numbers coming week after week, month after month, it's a very, very tall order for him.
All right. Well, Ari Shapiro, we'll be watching that, and we'll be watching your coverage of Mitt Romney, and we'll be watching all these Republican candidates as well. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Good to talk to you.